Hi there. Sorry for the late start. I hate to make excuses, but I'm in 2 online classes and administering 6 online classes, and it just gets a little crazy, especially Monday when all my homework's due. We had our 35-week ultrasound this morning, which I couldn't go to physically, so we had to do it by FaceTime, and I didn't want to miss that. So forgive me for that. It'll be a little shortened today, and then the homework for today, we'll just make it due at midnight tomorrow. So you don't need to have it by noon, just by midnight tomorrow, and it'll be a little shorter today. So starting with yesterday's homework. And so first things first, looks like 5 out of 6 took it seriously and did what I asked, and then we got Mark Spinnenweber, and I checked with Mr. Spinnenweber, and he didn't log on and do my work, so it's an imposter, and I think it's the same person who asked me to drop a mini shield. Now I don't mind joking around, but do just realize that these things take a lot of work, and when we got 7 people in the class all taking it seriously and trying to get something done, and one person laughing at us, just know that no one's laughing with you. And I gave this person, who I won't name, 4 out of 5 for yesterday. But if that sort of disrespect keeps up, oh yeah, and then it was clear that the person didn't watch the video because the answers were half-hearted. If that keeps up, it'll just keep going down. 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5, your choice. So with that being said, let's look at these sentences. Is multa urbes videt. So a lot of people had trouble with is, but this is the third person singular masculine pronoun, and so it just means he. And if you need to review those pronouns, go back to I think it was the first week we were online. There's a sheet with all of these put together, and maybe I'll make that available tomorrow. We can talk about that if we do a live class tomorrow, Wednesday the 8th. But this means he sees many cities. Most people were fine with it. Okay, now that's a direct statement. Here we're going to have the same thing in indirect speech. So audio is our main verb. I hear, and we're going to say that. We're going to use the conjunction that, even though there's no word for it in English. I hear that eum, accusative, third person masculine pronoun. I hear that he sees cities. Okay, so indirect speech, we've got our accusative subject, and the verbs in the infinitive within the indirect speech. I hear that he sees cities. And now, some people answered she. You know it's not she because the pronoun is masculine, eum. If it were eam, in the feminine masculine singular, we could say she, but we know it's a he here. Okay, now we're in secondary sequence. Audie bam, eum urbes videre. So I was hearing, and the only thing that's going to change in the subordinate clause, present infinitive means simultaneous with the main verb. I was hearing that he was seeing many cities. So some of you got it, some of you need a little work on the tense. Remember, present infinitive in indirect speech or indirect speech means simultaneous with the main verb. Okay, is multas urbes vidit. So direct statement again, and our verb is perfect, vidit. So we've got he saw many cities, or he has seen many cities. I would just go with saw. He saw many cities. Now we're in indirect speech, audie bam, I was hearing, so imperfect secondary sequence, right? I was hearing that he had seen many cities. I was hearing that he had seen many cities. So our infinitive is vidisse, which is perfect. And all that means is whatever the tense of the main verb is, you translate that infinitive prior to that main verb. So since our main verb is past time, the infinitive in the indirect speech has to be a pluperfect sounding translation. I was hearing that he had seen many cities. Yeah, some people are getting it. Good, very good. East Maltas Urbes Videbo. Okay, so this might have been the one that people were confused about Isan. It's a typo, so I think this should just be Maltas Urbes Videbo, which would be I will see many cities. Yeah, my bad. I don't know what happened on that one. Anyhow, audiebam eu Maltas Urbes visurum esse. So, audiebam, I was hearing that he many cities again, so everything looks the same. Now instead of videre or vidisse, present or perfect infinitive, we've got visurum esse. Now visurum is the perfect participle for that verb. And if you see URUM, just think future participle. That's about the only place you'll see that, I think. And then the present active infinitive of the verb to be. So that's how you form the perfect infinitive in Latin, and it's a periphrastic form. But all that means is action subsequent to the main verb. So I was hearing that he would see many cities. I was hearing that he would see many cities is how we would do that in English. Okay, so one person got it totally right. Now, if you were like this, I have heard that she will see many cities. You know, I'll take that for now. But get in the habit of using would when we're talking about a future idea in the past. Okay, questions now. Cur incule fugiant. This is just a direct question. Why are the inhabitants fleeing? Or why do the inhabitants flee? Just present tense. Now, we've got the same idea, cur incule fugiant, but subordinated in an indirect question. So dic mihi. Dic is the present active imperative of dicere. Remember, dic, duc, fac, fair should have an E, but it isn't there. So it's an irregular imperative, but it just means say or tell. And mihi, dative of indirect object. Tell to me, or say to me, why the inhabitants are fleeing. Now we've got fugiant in the present active subjunctive here. It's subjunctive only because it's within an indirect question. We can translate it as an idea simultaneous to the present imperative. So say to me why the inhabitants are fleeing now. Say to me now why the inhabitants are fleeing now. Okay, and it might, so dic mihi isn't strictly like, it's not like a verb of asking or anything like that. Don't be tripped up. So it's not so much the verbs that strictly introduce indirect questions. I think this will help clear things up. You're really looking for a question word that's not in a direct question. So it's the question words that introduce these indirect questions. We can talk about that tomorrow. Okay, quae opida incensa sunt. Direct question. So here's our interrogative adjective, which is the same as the relative pronoun. It's nominative, neuter, plural. So which towns? Now incensa sunt, this might have been confusing. If you looked up incensa, you would have gotten the verb incendere or incendo, which is third conjugation, but it means burn. Now incensa is the perfect passive participle. And remember those use first, second declension endings. So this short a here is going to be nominative, plural, neuter. So which towns, and if we didn't have sunt, so pretend we don't have sunt for a minute. Quae opida incensa, just which towns burnt, or even simpler, if we just had opida incensa, that means towns having been burnt. We have a form of the verb to be with the participle. What does that tell you? It's a periphrastic form, and this is a perfect passive verb form. So perfect passive participle plus present forms of the verb to be, that's going to be perfect passive verb forms. So which towns were burnt, or which towns have been burnt? I see a lot of people kind of close and just flipping it to an active voice translation. Like, that's not bad. Why were the towns burned? That's pretty close. You guys are getting there. It's which towns were burnt. Now, that's a direct question, right? Here's the same thing as an indirect question. So kwe opere in kenza, same phrase. Now we have no ski snay. And it looks like everybody got that as second singular present indicative. It's a question. So do you know which towns? So interrogative adjective here is introducing an indirect question. Do you know which towns? And now we have the same kind of verb, but now it's perfect passive subjunctive because sint is third plural subjunctive of the verb to be. And it's subjunctive because it's subordinated within an indirect question. And that's all. Do you know which towns have been burned? I guess that's the only thing. It's let's go back to sequence of tenses. So no skis, present, we're in primary sequence. When we're in primary sequence, we know present tense, subjunctive means simultaneous with the main verb. Perfect subjunctive, which we have here, means prior to the main verb. So we have to translate it either do you know which towns were burnt or do you know which towns have been burnt? Both of those would work. Okay, and here's the questions. Do we want to do a live via Zoom on Wednesdays? So it was kind of an even split. Actually, hold on. I got 3-2, and I think this was Abby's question, which I thought you were saying, Abby, that you would prefer to do a Zoom live on Wednesday. So as of right now, and it's 2 p.m. on Tuesday, I'm planning on doing Zoom live tomorrow, Wednesday the 8th at what time does class start on Wednesday? 10:20. We'll do it at 10:30. At 10:30. Now, for the homework for tonight, which again I said it was due by midnight, but maybe you can take a look at it before then. I put another question on there that's just multiple choice. Live tomorrow or pre-recorded tomorrow. I'm going to take that into account. But as of right now, I'm planning on doing the live Zoom session, so I'll send an email out today. And if anything changes, I'll make sure you know by 8 a.m. tomorrow. So fair enough? Okay, a couple questions then. Will we be able to see our scores on the National Latin exam? That's a great question. And I can find the answer to that out for you. I know that the scores, it was going to be at least till April until they scored them. So, I got to check on the exact date again. And I know our scores will probably be sent to the school or to the secretary email. So I'll look into that. Good question. Okay, translate east. Remember we said the pronoun. First half went well. Indirect questions still trip me up. And how to translate subjunctives. So in our live class tomorrow, that's something we can talk about. And east again. Okay, otherwise pretty good. Now, today, we're just there's no Latin today actually, and so you'll see the homework is all in English, but we're going to introduce this next kind of subordinate clause or complex sentence called a conditional, and these are way fun. They're pretty tricky. So we're gonna spend today and tonight getting the concept down in English, because it'll be hard to do it in Latin if you don't have a decent grasp of the concept in English. So look over this on your own too. This is linked in RenWeb. What is a conditional? Most simply, it's an if-then kind of sentence in English. So if I take a sip of my tea right now, I'll probably burn my mouth. Not bad, but if-then sentences. Okay, and condition is gonna be a word we're gonna get familiar with, because it's not exactly clear what it means, although we use it. So think about making like a business deal, or making a trade in a card game or something, or like Monopoly. I've been playing a lot of Monopoly lately because there's nothing to do. But maybe you're making a trade in Monopoly. You'd say, okay, here are my conditions. Does that make sense? So it's like, under these conditions, if you give me Park Place and accept $200 and Connecticut Avenue, under those conditions, this trade will happen. That's a conditional sentence. And you can you can say it like, if you meet my demands, then I'll make the trade. Does that make sense? So basically it's going to be the subordinate clauses in these things are going to denote the conditions under which the main clause could be true. Okay, and that's very abstract, so let's carry on. So these are a kind of complex sentence in which the main clause, which we call the apodosis, is actually dependent on the subordinate clause, which we can call the protasis. So protasis and apodosis, those are words we're gonna have to know. And it's always, I like if there's a confusing word, just go to Wiktionary and plug it in. So if we look up protasis, from Latin protasis, from Greek protasis, from the verb protano, so put forward. And in grammar, it's the antecedent in a conditional sentence. So the protasis is going to be like making that initial offer in a monopoly trade. It's like, here's my conditions. If you give me this, I'll give you that. The protasis is what's put forward. Now let's look at this second word, apodosis. You can probably hear osis, it's related. From ancient Greek, apodosis, from apo and dosis, a gift. So a gift given back. A gift given back. And in grammar, it means the consequential clause in a conditional sentence. So the then part. If you give me Park Place, I'll give you Pennsylvania Avenue. If you do this, then this will happen. So protasis and apodosis. Simplest way to remember this is that protasis is the if part of a conditional sentence, and apodosis is the then part. So protasis, if, apodosis, then. Now, it's tricky because in conditional sentences, it's actually the protasis, or the if half of the sentence, that's the subordinate clause. And think about it. If I say something like, if I do my studying, then I will do well on the exam. Which one can stand on its own? And think about it. If you say, if I do my studying, that's not a complete idea. So the protasis is actually going to be the subordinate clause in these things. And the apodosis then is going to be the main clause. Okay, so example, if the weather holds up, then we will go to the beach. Ask yourself, which one's the protasis, which one's the apodosis? Well, if the weather holds up, that's going to be the protasis and the subordinate clause, and it's also the conditions under which the main clause will occur. So if the weather holds up under those conditions, then we will go to the beach. Now, then we will go to the beach is the apodosis, it's the main clause, and it's only true if the subordinate clause happens. Make sense? So keep that in mind. We're going to come back to that in a minute. In the example above, the protasis is the weather holds up. This is the subordinate clause. It cannot stand on its own. The apodosis is we will go to the beach. This is the main clause. Its truth depends on the nature of the subordinate clause. Okay, its truth depends on the nature of the subordinate clause. Again, if the weather holds up, then we'll go to the beach. We'll go to the beach only if the weather holds up. Now, the conjunctions if and then in English introduce conditionals. So they're conjunctions, and I think it helps finding the main clause and subordinate clause if you consider if and then as separate from their clauses. So let's look at it that way. We've got the weather holds up. That's a phrase. That's not a sentence, right? We will go to the beach. Okay, a couple more examples. If I had done my homework, I would have gotten a passing grade. Protasis, if I had done my homework. Apodosis, I would have gotten a passing grade. If she wants to find out about that, then she can go ask the baker. Now in English, you'll see sometimes then is included, sometimes it's left out. We would play soccer with you if you should play by the rules. Now I know we don't say that in English very much, but I want to get you used to kind of translating, because there's more nuance in Latin conditionals than in English, and you got to use different modals to translate. If you should play by the rules, we would play soccer with you is what we call a future less vivid conditional in Latin. And so it means like, yeah, this might happen, but you never play by the rules, so it probably won't. Okay, my head was always hurting if I was smashing it into the lockers. my head was always hurting. There's the apodosis, right? The main clause. Under the conditions, when I was smashing it into lockers, it was always hurting. It's another way you could say this. If we were acting with character 100% of the time, then the world around us would be far better. It's true. That's a true statement. And that's what's called a present contrary to fact conditional in Latin. So if we were acting with character all the time now, and we're not, then the world around us would be way better if we were doing this, but we're not. Make sense? So I hope you can see from those few examples, there's variations, and these can mean different things. Now, and these can have different shades of meaning and different levels of truth or reality to them. So the key to understanding the relationship between the two clauses of a conditional sentence, the key is to understand the relationship between the two clauses. Okay, so these things are more about a logical relationship than anything. And you're going to have a list of rules to memorize for Latin, but always come back to what's the logical relationship between the main clause and the subordinate clause. So the protasis depends for its truth upon the nature of the apodosis. That's difficult. The protasis depends for its truth on the nature of the apodosis. Okay, what does that mean? Let's go back to the first example. If the weather holds up, then we will go to the beach. Okay, so the apodosis. We will go to the beach. That's the outcome, maybe hoped for. We will go to the beach. Now, we have to look at the protasis to figure out the conditions under which the apodosis would be true. So, under what conditions would we go to the beach? If the weather holds up. Now, let's look at the nature of that subordinate clause. If the weather holds up. What is that saying? It's saying, like, right now, we don't know. The weather might hold up. It might start thunderstorming. It might be somewhere in between, and then we'll have to make a judgment call. We don't know. But in the future, if it holds up, then we'll go to the beach. So the nature of that subordinate clause is like this uncertain future idea, and it means the main clause, the apodosis, is kind of hanging in the balance. We don't know until we figure out what the weather does, whether we're going to go to the beach or not. Now, the protasis isn't always going to be a future idea. Let's look at this one. If I had done my homework, I would have gotten a passing grade. So weirdly enough, you can talk about conditionals in the past. And this is what we call in Latin a contrary to fact conditional. So yesterday, if I had done my homework and I didn't, that's right, because that's the implication of this protasis. If I had done my homework, you wouldn't be saying this if you had done your homework, right? This person didn't do their homework. If I had done my homework, then today, in the present, I would have gotten a passing grade. But since I didn't do my homework, I'm failing now. I failed. So that's a different kind of protasis than if the weather holds up. If I had done my homework, you can't change anything about it now. And so, would have gotten a passing grade. What's the truth of that statement? It's false. He didn't get a passing grade. And it's false because it depends on what the protasis is saying. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. I find these really interesting, and River, I think they'll make a lot of sense for you because you do computer programming, right? That's all based on if, then, and I don't understand it, but I understand the logic of conditionals, and it seems like a similar kind of thing. So I think when you get over kind of how gnarly they are to remember, they're pretty fun. Okay, so in Latin, the nature of the apodosis will be determined by the tense and mood of its verb. So that's where all this subjunctive versus indicative stuff is going to come into play. So tense and mood of the verb in the protasis is going to determine the nature of the protasis. So this is enough for now, like just the main ideas, but suffice to say there's going to be a chart eventually, and we're going to have 9 kinds of conditionals, and they're all different combinations of mood and tense in protases and apodoses. So it gets pretty complicated, as you can see. 9 different combinations with 2, I don't know math, so you figure it out. But that's kind of the main conceptual idea of conditional sentences. And your homework for tonight, which again I said you can you can have till midnight tomorrow, midnight Wednesday to do it. Although I would appreciate some more feedback on what we're doing tomorrow. Your homework tonight, though, is going to be just English. I gave you 9 or 10 conditional sentences, and you're just going to be identifying protasis and apodosis. And pay attention to the different shades of meaning there. Is it talking about something simple in the present? Are we talking about a future conditional? Is it something that happened in the past that can't be changed? Is it present contrary to fact? Just keep an eye out for those shades of meaning. And last thing here. So like I said, I'm planning right now on doing that Zoom meeting live tomorrow at 10:30. So I'll go ahead and send an email out to you and your parents, and then put it on RenWeb. But that's my plan for now. If anything changes, then I will let you know first thing in the morning tomorrow. Okay? Have a good rest of your day. See ya.